A lot of us music producers say we know how to play piano, but really, we know how to play piano. Then this video is going to help you fake it till you make it and get human sounding performances by using MIDI. This is not a video about chord progressions or theory or anything like that. We're going to look at some basic arrangement styles and techniques that we're going to layer with each other so that we can go from something as simple as this to something more dynamic and human sounding like this. So depending on your genre, it might be totally appropriate to draw in all of these MIDI notes by hand and keep them fully quantized and have the velocities be all the same. But in my case, I usually prefer a more human approach and something that sounds somewhat improvised. And really, it's not realistic to try to do that by drawing in MIDI. It's just a waste of time to try to get all the velocities right and randomize the notes the perfect amount. So if you actually can record it, then that way you're going to get the randomness of when the notes hit, because they're always going to be a little bit different, and you're going to get the randomness of velocity. So first of all, some approaches to recording MIDI that will make your life a lot easier if your piano skills are not that high. So first thing you can do, lower the tempo. This is MIDI. It's not going to get stretched after, so nobody is going to know if you did this. Next up, if that's not enough, you can record it in smaller chunks. Instead of doing 8 bars sections, you can do 1 or 2 bars. If it's still too hard after that, record it one hand at a time, so just the right hand, then just the left hand. If that's still too hard, you can split the right hand part into 2 hands. So now you're playing the right hand part with both hands, and same thing for the left hand. Hopefully with these techniques, you'll be able to combine all those to play the part that you actually want and not just settle for something that you can play at tempo with both hands at the same time. Before I get into the examples, I'm going to play you everything but the piano so that you can get the full context of what we're going to be working with. Until we start getting to the point where we're creating our final product, I'll play just piano, bass, and drums so you can really hear the different techniques more clearly. The absolute most basic piano arrangement you can have in a full context like this and get away with it is just one hand doing a constant rhythm. So common examples for that are just quarter notes or eighth notes and the offbeat versions of those things too. So since these don't really need much explaining, I'll play a couple bars of quarter notes on the beat, then a couple bars of quarter notes off the beat. So in this case, I find the offbeat quarter notes to sound better. They're less heavy and plodding like the downbeat quarter notes are, so I'm going to focus on those ones from now on. If you want to beef that up a little bit without being too busy, you can start adding some bass notes in the left hand to that, either just playing the roots of the chords as whole notes or quarter notes too, or you can also double the bass line if it's like a melodic bass line like this one is. So if you want to look at the MIDI here, you'll see the blue is the right hand, and then the red is the left hand. So in this case, I still prefer the offbeat ones, but I would not choose this. But if I were to choose this option, you can see that some of the bass notes and some of the right hand notes are the same pitches. I would need to either remove the top note of the bass or take the bottom note of the right hand and boost it up an octave, or either revoice the chord in one way or another. Let's see what it sounds like with the bass line doubling the actual bass guitar. That's not what I would choose to do. There's just too much going on, and I'd rather have it sound like the bass is kind of just having fun on its own, as opposed to having it sound like some written thing. Another variation of the constant rhythm is, instead of having chords in the right hand and bass notes or nothing in the left hand, you can have chords in the left hand playing in the same range as before, but now you can have a melodic note like an octave or something playing in the right hand. That's an option, but not the one that I would pick for this context. It still just takes up too much space. It gets annoying to have that note repeated all the time. Of course, you don't have to do that. You could move it too. We know that the vocals are going to be kind of in that register too, so we want to leave some space for them there. So if a constant rhythm is kind of boring you, or it just doesn't fit the song at all, the next thing you can try is what's called rhythmic comping. So you might think, well, anything that you play is going to be rhythmic because it is a rhythm. And that's kind of true. But really, what we mean when we say rhythmic comping is repeating a similar rhythm that creates an accompaniment pattern that once it's established, it kind of goes into the background. It still contributes to the rhythmic motor of the song, but it's not changing all the time and grabbing your attention all the time. So here's what that would sound like. Good piece of advice for rhythmic comping is to follow or at least not get in the way of the accents of whatever the main thing going on at this point is. So if I turn on the vocals, the rhythmic comping of the piano is kind of accenting what the vocalist is doing, but not getting in the way and not changing all the time. It's basically playing a very simple rhythm like a dotted quarter note and an eighth note most of the time. And when it's not, it's accenting where the vocals are syncopating and like anticipating the bars and the chord changes, which in turn creates the rhythm, which makes this rhythmic comping. So to play further with the idea of rhythmic comping, we can have the right hand basically doing the same thing as it was before, but we can have an interplay between the right hand and the left hand. So we can have alternations between the two hands that make it seem a little bit more dynamic, but they're still not really calling too much attention to themselves. We have the rhythmic comping, which is a bit more elaborate than before, but we also have some kind of straight, consistent rhythm. Instead of playing both hands as a quarter note or an offbeat quarter note, the right hand could be doing like the offbeats and the left hand could be doing on-beat quarter notes or stuff like that. So let's listen to that again. So it's still very simple rhythmically, still very easy to latch on to what the pattern is, even though it's changing a little bit because it's following the vocals. So it's not just like banging and kind of banging a rhythm into our heads. It's more playful that way. The next level beyond that is doing rhythmic fills. It's derived from rhythmic comping. So you can think of it as a percussive fill, except we have a dimension of harmony to it. The rhythmic fill happens in this spot. This is actually what was used in the final product of the actual song, and so let's listen to what that sounds like with the other elements too. So for the sake of argument, let's add some other stuff and other techniques on top of this and be the piano player that would potentially get fired for being too annoying and too in the way. But let's just see what happens. So, obviously, there are endless options to what you can do with this, but let's just explore a couple ones that are pretty common that I personally find fun. The first thing you can do is you can vary the texture that you have. Just by looking at the MIDI, you can already see that where there's a bit more of an arc to it, and it's changing styles a lot. So there's a lot going on here, so let's just mute the vocals and saxes so it's a bit easier to hear. So you can hear that it's a lot more dynamic, a bit more in your face too than what we've had before. This might be a little bit busy for the context of this song, but in certain cases, it might actually work. It has kind of like a jazz band feel where everyone's really going for it towards the end. We can say that there's 4 different techniques here. So we kind of have the rhythmic comping here. Here we have the octave plus chords in the left hand. And then here we have a rhythmic fill. And then here we have a 2-note comping thing, which is totally different from what we've heard before, but it works because it's the last couple bars of the song, so it makes sense to go down to that. Another cool technique that really adds a lot is to have, I guess you could call them grace notes or something, but when I'm thinking of them just to myself, I kind of think of them as like dweh. So that's like when the note goes quickly from like that kind of thing, just like semitone approach to the chord tone really quickly. We have some here, we have some in this bar, and then here too. So let's listen to just the piano for that. Another thing that you can add is doing single note fills, but in this case, since there's a sax player already doing that and a bass player doing a very melodic line that itself is filling in quite a bit, it doesn't really make sense to add any more fills. But if you really want to know about fills and you really want to know about bass fills and melodic bass lines, well, look at that. There's already a video about that. How cool is that?